Hey guys, what's going on? This is Sergeant Merrill, and we're back to War Thunder, where I'm going to be walking you through one of my more enjoyable games using the British Spitfire. Now, one tip I want to get right out from the gate is to go and use the simple mouse controls. There are so many people who tell me over Twitter that they feel like they're Helen Keller when they're flying the planes in War Thunder when they first jump into the game. It's because it kind of jumps you, for some people, into that more difficult control scheme, and you are going to feel like you're an intoxicated Helen Keller. You're just not going to be able to fly correctly. And when you do use the simple mouse controls, it's like you don't even need that second hand. It's like you get to use it for much more important things. Now, what I want to do in this particular video is kind of walk you through what I had going on in my head when I was playing. And this isn't going to be the greatest gameplay in the world, but what I enjoyed about this is I went into this game with a strategy, I executed it, and it kind of worked out for me. But first, I want to go ahead and stop it right here because this was an interesting engagement. These are two exact same planes coming at each other, and I came out on top. And I want to talk about why. First, in this game, altitude is advantage. In any dogfight, if you have altitude over the enemy, you're going to have more options than they do. It takes longer to climb than it does to dive. And you can use diving to your advantage when moving into your next turn or into your next maneuver. It gives you speed, it gives you options. Whereas when you climb, it reduces your speed, it reduces your options. And here, I clearly had the advantage over this guy. Now, I'm not saying it's a huge advantage. I want to say Spitfire against Spitfire, where you have the altitude, you're going to win it 7 times out of 10 if your aim is on point. It always comes down to who has a better aim in a lot of cases. And also how heavily armed the enemy plane is. But considering this was another Spitfire, I felt completely comfortable taking this risk. I took a little damage to my wings, and unfortunately for the rest of the match, I just kind of got to live with that. On this particular level, I'm not good on landing on these carriers, and I'm not even sure if landing on one of them will get you repaired. Either way, it's not worth the time for me, so I'm like, alright, you know, I just got to suck it up with this damage and play a little bit smarter. And that brings me back to that strategy that I was talking about when I first came into the match. You know, I realized the strength of the Spitfire is its turn time. I mean, it can put a plane down pretty quick, but definitely not as quick as some of your other options, some of the other, you know, fighter planes. This is a dogfighting plane, man. This is meant to maneuver behind the enemy and just keep doing it, turn after turn after turn. It's meant for maneuvers. It's just one of the best planes for that. I really enjoy that aspect of it. And keeping that in mind, it means that you need to be constantly up close in the enemy's face and engaging them in maneuvers. You know, get them turning, get them to think that they can dogfight with you, and then when they can't, tear them apart and make them realize their mistake. Now, at the moment, I realize that this B-37 has kind of made it past our front line, and not many people are paying attention to him. And in this game, when it comes to the objective, it's largely about the ground targets, or, you know, the ships here. And some players are smart and they want to win the game, and that's what they go after. Most of the people are there to dogfight and destroy the other airplanes. So a lot of times you'll see planes like this get behind the lines, and no one's really paying attention to them. So at the moment, I tried to gain some altitude so that I could dive down at them. But I want to be very careful about this. Something that you do not want to do with these bomber planes is get right behind them. And I start to notice that when he's firing back at me. I'm like, all right, you know, let me disengage, let me break away. You know, I'm trying to keep my silhouette of my plane lined up so that it's a little bit more difficult to hit for some of his machine gunner positions. And then I reapproach him, and I'm trying to get him from the side or from the top. I don't want to get right behind him. It's really frustrating for a lot of people because they'll sit behind a B-37 and just attack and attack and attack, and they'll get hit marker after hit marker after hit marker, and they're not taking it down. They don't realize how heavily armored and prepared a plane like that is for that type of attack. What you should do is be a little bit more patient and a little bit smarter about it. Get it to where he turns his wings, and you can, man, if you can get that perfect silhouette like what we see right here, look at all that target there is for me to hit. And I just tear him apart. And again, this is where players, they start to see blood, and they get right behind him. They see how I just disengage, reduce the silhouette, don't give him much of a target to shoot at, and then gain altitude, re-engage. You don't want to see blood and get caught behind him and think, oh, he's almost down, he's almost down. You know, because then that's where you're in his world at that point. You know, he is armored for those type of shots, and your front just isn't going to be able to handle it. Especially in the Spitfire, you're just going to get torn apart like paper. And speaking of which, I narrowly avoid this yak, man. Those effing yaks, man. I'm telling you, the amount of guns on that damn airplane will just rip you to shreds. For some reason, it's just something I don't like to go head-to-head with. You know? And their turn time is pretty good, too. So a lot of times, if I get the opportunity, I like to put their ass to the ground as quickly as possible. Just give a giant FU because they're so overused, if you ask me. But here, I see 5 friendlies. They're going after that guy. It's a waste of time. So I kind of am reassessing the situation. And this next thing that I see here just gets me excited because this is what the Spitfire is built for. I see all these dogfights happening in front of me. And this is just, when it comes to these situations, it's all about maneuver. It's all about who can outmaneuver the other person. It doesn't matter necessarily how many enemies you're going against because everybody's got a turn. And it's also really exciting to come into a dogfight that's already happening and see your buddies getting torn apart, come in and save his ass. You know, it's great. Look at that. Just saved his ass. He would owe me a beer. I see this Mustang, you know, someone took it out. I got the assist, but a lot of times, you know, I like to put the nail in the coffin. Just let them know you're dead and there's no changing it. It's glorious, man. I love this game. So this is, like I said, this is where the Spitfire lives and breathes and succeeds, is when there's target after target after target. I love it, man, and this really turned out in my favor. Like I said, I'm not sure who to engage just yet, so I'm trying to gain altitude, working on that. I don't want to sacrifice speed too much, so I'm doing it gradually as I kind of use situational awareness, gain, you know, what's going on the battlefield right now, who's going to be my next target, which friend needs help. This is the exciting part of this game, and it can turn so quickly, and it's so hard to tell where you made your mistake, which is one of the fun things about going back through these videos, and to see how things worked out in my favor and what things, had I realized I was doing at the time or not, actually ended up, you know, working for me and putting me at the top of the leaderboard. And believe me, for me, that's something exciting in this game, because I'm not like an expert pilot. You know, I didn't come into this game with a whole lot of knowledge about aviation. I'm a pretty good pilot in Battlefield, but that means like diddly squat in this fucking game. Like the flight mechanics in Battlefield are nowhere near what you have to consider when you're playing this game. You know, like right now in Battlefield, I would have no issue chasing this guy down. But look at my speed's dropping, the altitude isn't gaining like it should. You know, that means I need to disengage from this. And then when I'm diving back down and I take too hard of a turn, I need to consider G-force, or your pilot can fall unconscious, or your wings could rip off, which is something I really need to consider at this point, considering how damaged they are. So when you see these gameplays and you see me doing something, you know, that puts me close to the top of the leaderboard, it's really exciting for me because I'm learning new things, and I'm getting into not just aviation in general, but World War II fighters and the planes of that era. It's something that I never would have really gotten into otherwise, and it's one of the beautiful things about this game for me. And it's not just for me. I notice it with a lot of the other players. I mean, some of the airplanes are clearly outclassed. Like they're clearly obsolete to some of the airplanes that you can unlock as you level up. But people still stick with them because of, like, this nostalgic value. Like, they learn something about it, and they're like, you know what, I love this airplane, I love flying with it, I love succeeding with it. And that's something that I can connect with and really enjoy. You know, I feel the same way about weapons in Battlefield. There are clearly some choices that are obsolete in comparison to other choices. We know that. But still, some of us stick with those obsolete choices because we're like, you know what, I love this weapon, I can connect with it, I love its history, I love its story. And I want to continue using it, and I want to succeed with it. It like builds your personality within the game. You see it translated over in War Thunder in like an entirely different way with aviation, and it's a lot of fun to see. And I guess for me, like the Spitfire has been something that I've connected with, and it's funny because a lot of times in games like this, I tend to stick with the American line. I want to learn something about America, America's history. You know, I stick with a lot of American weapons. I stick with a lot of American vehicles and World of Tanks, something that I'm just now getting into. I'm sticking with the American tanks. I want to learn more about them. But the Spitfire is something that's really interesting to me. It's just a beautiful vehicle. You know, the Mustang is another one that I want to get into, but I haven't unlocked it. But back to what's going on in front of us. This is another great example of how altitude is advantage. He is going the complete opposite direction, is outrunning me, but I have a significant amount of altitude on him. I'm able to use that to gain speed, then use the advantage of the Spitfire with that great turn time to turn back around at him and then keep speed on him. So I'm able to chase this guy down where I otherwise would have gotten outrun. And this is a situation where you don't need to be scared to get behind them. This is where they need to be scared. This is where their butt's going to be puckering. And this guy is normally a good pilot. You know, Skyline, I've recognized the name. I've played against him before, and he has torn me apart in a couple different engagements. So this isn't necessarily him being a bad pilot. It's just me having that altitude, turning it into speed, and making it a turkey shoot after that. And this is going to round out the match. And I honestly think when I took out that bomber toward the beginning of the match, it gave us a significant advantage. It seems like the people who are going to use bombers pull them out at the beginning of the match to try and win as quickly as possible. And when that bomber goes down, they switch to their fighter airplanes. And that seems to be the case of what happened. Like, I recognized the bomber, took him out. It seemed like I had a lot of friendlies there to help out with that particular effort, and then we moved forward and just won with dogfighting. And it was a good match. You know, not something that you're always going to see from me, but like I said, I did have a strategy going in, a couple things that I wanted to try out to see if it worked, altitude being one of them, constantly climbing, constantly trying to use it to my advantage, and also reducing the silhouette of my airplane against those bombers who can typically tear you apart when you're right behind them, and also just realizing the strength of the Spitfire, or just the strength of your plane that you're flying in general. You need to realize what its role is and definitely use that to your advantage. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I want to do more of this. I enjoy this game significantly, and I hope you guys do too. If you don't, or don't have this game, it is free to play, and there's going to be a link down in the description for you to download that and enjoy it. Highly encourage you to do that. But that's all I have for this video. This is Sergeant Merrill out here.